I'm Olli Haaskivi. I was on The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Winning Time and Manifest and a bunch of other TV shows and films. And this summer I will be in Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, and you are watching Red's reviews and interviews.
How are you today, Olli?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great. Pleased to be here. So first off, thanks for joining me. So cool to be talking to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so flattered.
Of course. You've been in some pretty cool stuff already. You've been in Marvel, you've been in Winning Time, Manifest, and now you're going to be in a Christopher Nolan film, which is like super cool. That's usually like the top tier films. So I can't wait for Oppenheimer to come out, and I can't wait to talk about that very, very soon. First off, can you just tell me a bit about your beginnings as an actor and how that sort of developed for you into a professional career?
Yeah, I was one of those weird kids who always knew they wanted to be an actor. I don't remember how I learned what it was. I think before I was aware of too much, I was aware of that somehow. And I feel really lucky that where I mostly grew up in Sarasota, Florida, at the time that I was growing up there were a bunch of theaters there. There's still a lot, but there's a lot of community theater. There's a lot of professional theater. It's a town that really values the arts of all kinds. And so by the time I was 9 years old, I was able to do a lot of shows, not just in community theater, but in professional theater with adults who were coming down from New York or coming over from Los Angeles for a couple months to do a show, or a lot of professionals who had big careers on Broadway moved to Sarasota to sort of retire, but they would still work at these theaters. And so from a young age, I was aware, because I was working with people who had legitimate careers, I was aware that it could be made into a career. And I got really serious about, acting classes and voice lessons and dance classes. I really began doing musical theater. And so that was my main passion for a really long time. And so I started taking my training really seriously, maybe a little, I don't want to say too seriously, but more seriously than most 15-year-old probably taking it. And went to college for musical theater at the University of Michigan and moved to New York City basically 15 years ago this summer. And started here mostly doing theater and musical theater, and over time it transitioned into mostly what I do now is television and film.
Right, that's interesting. So did any sort of movies, TV shows, anything like that inspire you to go into the industry in the first place?
So many. Do you know what I think a lot about is you might be too young to know. Do you know the show Ally McBeal?
It rings a bell. I've heard of it.
It was a very big TV show, maybe even before you were born, but it was a Fox TV show that was on when I was in middle school, starring Callista Flockhart and Peter MacNicol and Greg Gurman and Jane Krakowski and Lucy Liu. And I remember it probably premiered when I was in 6th or 7th grade. And it was the first time I had seen actors on television getting to be a part of a show that was equal parts comedic and dramatic. And I think before then, I highly recommend watching the show. I think you can watch it on Hulu. Please write to me after you've watched it. Every single one of those actors is unreal on that show. They are beautiful, dramatic actors, but they are hilarious physical comedians. A lot of them sing on the show. It's just an all-star cast. And I think I remember going, oh, I didn't know that a TV show could do that, and I didn't know that actors could do that. Because before then, I had only seen things that were strictly comedy or strictly drama. And I'm really working on figuring out how I can work with each of those actors. I've worked with Lucy Liu. I've worked with Julianne Nicholson. I think I'm like checking the boxes of
Yeah, that
Valley.
must have been cool though.
Oh my God, yeah. And but again, looking back, there were so many films. I remember seeing The Squid and the Whale when I was in high school. That blew my mind. Or maybe that was when I was early in college. I can't remember. But there were a lot of things that inspired me and continue to inspire me. But I remember, again, something happened in my brain when I watched Ally McBeal when I was in middle school.
Yeah, that's interesting how that sort of blend, inspired you, because, a lot of TV shows and films are very sort of strict, in that genre, but it's cool to see other things kind of bridging the gaps almost between those genres.
Well, and I feel like I feel so lucky that in my career so far, I've gotten to do a lot of comedy. I've gotten to do a lot of drama. I've done really light things. I've done really dark things and everything in between. And so I do kind of look back on watching that show as the beginning of realizing, oh, maybe you can kind of have it all in that way.
Yeah. Awesome. So very briefly, tell me about your audition for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Were you familiar with the MCU, and did you sort of realize how big of an opportunity it was in sense of how big the fan base was and how popular it was?
Sure. No, I was not very familiar with the MCU. I mean, I knew that it existed. I had seen some of the films, but it wasn't something that I followed particularly. But I was well aware of the huge fan base. I was aware. I mean, I think I was sort of intimidated by the MCU because I felt like how can I just jump in the middle of seeing all these films without knowing all the backstory of every single thing? I mean, I'd seen Black Panther. I thought that was amazing. I'd seen one of the Avengers. I'd seen them from time to time. My audition, I did it in this apartment where I'm sitting right now. It was just a tape. I think about that audition somewhat regularly, actually, because I put myself on tape with my best friend who often reads with me for these auditions, and I didn't think the tape was particularly good. I didn't have a lot of time for some reason. I don't know if I was maybe doing a play at the time or the turnaround time was really tight. I can't remember. But I made the tape and didn't feel great about it. And I remember the next morning thinking to myself, oh, that was a really good opportunity and maybe you blew it. And, then oftentimes when you're up for a job on a TV show or in a film, you'll get a kind of heads up that says, he's in the running for this thing, he's in the final 3 people, or we're just double checking that he's still available because people like that tape or whatever. And I received none of that whatsoever. And then maybe a month later, 6 weeks later, out of the blue, just got an offer for it. And
wow.
Yeah, and I'd fully let it go in my head. And if it crossed my mind, I'm sure I thought of how embarrassed I was by that tape. And so, yeah, with no feedback, no callback, no, can you retape with these notes? It just sort of kind of out of the blue. It was not one that every once in a while you send off a tape and you feel like, oh, I bet I'll hear something from these, or this felt really good. Maybe this, yeah, I had such, I thought the tape was not great. And incredibly luckily, I guess it was fine enough for those.
Of course. I mean, that must have been a pretty cool surprise, just kind of thinking, nothing will come of that. And then here you are working for Marvel.
Yeah. And my memory of it too was that once I got the job, I only had maybe a week or 10 days or so before I did the job. And yeah, I mean, I think about it pretty regularly because I try to work as hard as I can on all my audition tapes. I don't want to send anything that I don't feel great about, but sometimes you don't have the time because they don't always give you the time to do a great job. And I think about it pretty regularly when I send something off that I feel kind of iffy about. I remember well, you felt pretty bad about that Falcon and the Winter Soldier tape, and that turned out okay. So you do never know.
Absolutely. Tell me about how you went on to build the character of Dr. Wilfred Nagel. How did you create his persona?
Sure. I had an acting teacher when I was in high school, the late great Mladen Kiselov, who said, "Your script is your treasure map." And I think about that pretty regularly. And, that Dr. Wilfred Nagel sequence, he talks a lot about where he's been and what he's been doing and what has worked and what hasn't worked. And I really just tried to dive into that and to think a lot about, well, he mentions that experience. What must that have felt like? Or what has it been like probably living by himself in this weird lair for a very long time? You just try to think about every detail you can and try to make that as rich as possible, as detailed as possible. And then I owe a lot of it to Kari Skogland, who directed that series so beautifully, I thought, because we really had the time on that sequence. We had 4 or 5 days to shoot it. And what that gave us was the opportunity for Kari to say, great, we have that take that you just did where he's a little bitter and jaded. Why don't we do a take where he thinks it's all pretty funny what has happened to him? Or why don't we do a take where he has no emotion? And so
you've got options there.
Yeah, a lot of options. And I feel like as a result, the character was created kind of in the moment as a result of those conversations. I mean, I came in with a lot of ideas. I came in with a point of view. I definitely feel like I had a take on it when I showed up to work because that's my job. But I do feel like the character came about as a result of that sort of playing around with the text in conversation with Kari and with those other actors.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Didn't know, as a result of that, I didn't know what it would be when I watched it, because we tried such a broad range of different versions of him. And yeah, because I also, when I looked up the character, when I Googled the character, I saw pretty quickly that I look nothing like the rendering in the comics. And so that also freed me up to feel like, well, whatever we're going to do is our own. Like they're clearly not bound to recreating the comics because they wouldn't have cast me. There are people that look way more like that. And so it was fun to, I think we all kind of discovered him on our feet, which was so exciting.
Yeah, that's a great answer. How did your experience working on that show differ from the sort of typical job?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because I don't know that there is a typical job, because every single set has its own schedule and its own energy and its own culture. The thing I will say, though, that I kind of alluded to is that we had a lot of time because Marvel has not a small budget. We had, I think that sequence was blocked out for a week to shoot. And a lot of other television shows would go, oh, that all takes place in the same location. I bet we can just do that in a day. Or I bet we can do that in a day and a half. And so I really feel like the difference was that we had time to ask questions and try a lot of different things and tweak the writing and tweak the blocking. And that's why the performance isn't just like a scared actor trying to act as fast as they can, because we really did have the luxury of that time that I'm so thankful for. And that jumps out to me as the most unusual part of it. And that also, sets are so massive and they're so gorgeous. And you do have a very sort of like movie magic feeling stepping onto those sets. And, you know, I live in New York City, and I'm used to, you know, shooting in the back of a bookstore that you have to give back in 3 hours, or in, you know, weird sort of dingy converted warehouse sound stages in Queens. And so to sort of set foot on those Marvel sets, which are gigantic and so detailed and so beautiful, that was exciting. That's not an experience I've had too many times.
So what was the biggest thing you sort of took from that experience, and how would you say it's affected your career since?
It's a really good question.
Thank you.
I think I really was struck by Kari and the rest of that crew, all of whom had worked together on dozens of different Marvel projects before, plus the actors I worked with, Anthony and Sebastian and Emily and Daniel. I was really, really struck by how welcoming they were to me and how inclusive they were and how they made me feel like I'd been part of the family for years with them. And so that feeling was really nice to take with me, as well as to try to engender that feeling in other jobs where maybe I'm the person who's there more regularly and new people are coming in, and I can be part of making them feel welcome. And yeah, I mean, so I took that for sure. And I think I got a little bit of confidence from it, feeling like that wasn't an easy job for various reasons, just because it's a ton of text and that character is a mystery in some ways. And so I think I got some confidence because they made me feel like I really delivered for them. They made me feel like there's no doubt who has the heavy lifting to do here, and everyone is really happy that you're the person here doing it.
Yeah.
And so that's a feeling to leave with. And then for your other question, you know, that show came out when the world was still pretty shut down. And so a ton of people were watching it all at the same time. And so I do think, was the question how it impacted my career?
Yeah, so far.
Yeah. I think that, you know, getting to be a part of something that everyone is watching and talking about is really fun. And it's also a show where if you pay attention, there aren't that many guest people on that show. It's actually a pretty intimate show. And the thing I didn't realize when I was shooting it, because I didn't have any of the other scripts, was that, you know, those first couple episodes really do like lead up to Dr. Nagel. Like they're on the hunt for him, and he's discussed a bit before he shows up. And so I think it just helped in terms of some visibility, and I got a lot of messages from people, and it wasn't like, you know, everything changed overnight by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think it was just like, oh cool, he's in that too. And it just like adds to the list of things that we've seen him do and different types of roles we've seen him play. And it was really fun. I'm so thankful for that experience, shooting it, and the experience of having something like that come out and meeting those fans and realizing, oh, this is going to be something that I guess, you know, for the rest of my life in airports or whatever, people are going to remember that performance.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's move on to talk about Oppenheimer. How did your role in that come about? And what do you believe was the main reason that you got the role, you in particular?
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. It came about in a pretty standard way. My manager called and said they've called to check your availability for this mysterious Christopher Nolan project that's going to be shooting next year. This was probably October of 2021. And I said, please tell them I am available, and please tell them I would love to audition. Because sometimes when they call to check your availability, sometimes they're just putting a list together of people that are available to make offers to. Like, sometimes it's not for an audition. Sometimes it's just to present to someone like Chris Nolan, here are 10 actors that are available, take your pick.
Okay.
And I said, please make it very clear to them that I want to audition. I don't want to, if it's a list of actors to make offers to for a Chris Nolan film, I'm probably pretty low on that list because he can get anyone in the world, basically. And so I said, tell them I'll audition. A week or two later, an audition came in. That was 2 scenes from The Theory of Everything because they weren't releasing anything from the Oppenheimer script. And I made those 2 scenes. And the casting director, John Papsadera, who has done all of Chris's films, said to my manager initially, it's a very short list of people that we're calling. And so I kind of thought that was its own accomplishment. I really thought that, there's no world in which you're ever going to be part of this film, but you can have the knowledge that at one moment in time, you were on the radar. And so I made the tape. I got an email about 2 weeks later that was forwarded from John's office that said, Chris really likes Olli. Can he now retape those same 2 scenes, but with a German accent? Because he isn't sure if he'd be a German character or an American character. And so I had about, I think, to make that tape, I worked with a dialect coach twice a day that entire week. Set up the same 2 scenes with a German accent. And again, had the exact same thought that was like, this is going absolutely nowhere. You will not be in this film. But you have an email that said, Chris really likes Olli or whatever. Chris thought Olli was great, whatever it said. And so just the knowledge that in some alternate universe, this brilliant person watched your tape and went, maybe, I was fully prepared for that to be the end of the road. And it was about 2 months of waiting. And every couple weeks, they did the thing that the Falcon and the Winter Soldier didn't do, where every couple weeks they would get in touch and say, do his dates still work? Is he still available? He's still in the running. And then it was the beginning of January 2022 when I found out I got it.
Wow. I mean, what a feeling. That must have been pretty cool.
Yeah, and you go through such a range of emotions when you know that you're in the running for something, because you go from feels like this is going to happen, oh my God, you start to fantasize about certain things, but then immediately after you go, oh, this is never going to happen. This is stop dreaming about it. And so yeah, and it had been a couple months since I had any job at all. I mean, a lot of things were coming close. None of them were working out. And so I just assumed that this would be another thing that I got close to that didn't work out. And I really do feel just unbelievably lucky that it happened.
So you said that was in October of 2021, right? When you first were contacted.
I think I auditioned. I think the first audition was end of October. Then it wasn't until mid-January that I got the job.
So Falcon and Winter Soldier was out by then, wasn't it? So do you think that they might have seen you in that, and that's what sort of led to you getting the role, maybe?
I think that's possible. I think that I definitely feel a little bit, I have no proof of this, but I definitely feel a little bit like the visibility of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier put me on the map to get winning time.
Is it?
I kind of think those two things combined made it maybe not fully ludicrous for Chris to cast someone like me in Oppenheimer. But also Chris, he can get whoever he wants. And oftentimes when you find out that you're in the running for something, you know that that tape is getting emailed around to dozens of network people or studio people, all of whom have to weigh in. But when someone like Chris Nolan is making a film, I have a feeling that I have a feeling he doesn't have to go to too many people for approval. And so I started to suspect, because I was also saying very aggressively, like, tell them I'll say one line. I don't care what it is. I just want to be in there somewhere. And after it's stretched out for long enough, I felt like it feels like I'm in this film somewhere. And I do, this hasn't been confirmed, but I do sort of think at a certain point, Chris probably had, the headshots of 15 guys, and he was just kind of scrambling around like, okay, well, if Jack plays that one, then who plays this one? Or I really like Michael here, which means that maybe Olli is there and not there. I have a feeling that was the thing that was kind of happening when we were getting all those vague calls that said, this is still in the air, don't give up on it yet.
Awesome. So, did you do much research for the role? Because I've heard that it's like loosely based on a book. Can you tell us any more about your character?
I actually don't know if I can.
Okay. I don't want to get you in trouble, but say what you
can.
Sure.
Yeah, we can come back after the film comes out. For whatever reason, they have not released the name of the person that I play in it, and I don't want to make anybody upset with me. But I did a ton of research. I can show you my notebook's worth of research after July 21st.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. But it must have been really cool for you to be sort of transported to that time period through the sets, the costumes, all of that stuff.
Yeah, and we shot in Los Alamos, New Mexico, where a lot of those things actually happened, obviously. And so we were in buildings that were there in the 1940s, and you could sort of feel, the ghosts of these people kind of seeping in a little bit. And it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience we all got to have. And everybody, every single person did a ton of research. We all cared so much. We all knew what an extraordinary opportunity this was. And so every single person, even if they were just coming in for a day to say two lines, was bringing their A+++ game to the.
So describe the film for us in 3 words.
Oh wow. I haven't seen the film yet.
Yeah.
I have read it, obviously, and I've seen the trailers, and I've talked to people who have seen it. I think it is propulsive. I think it is thrilling. And I want to say I think it's intimate, but I don't know. I haven't seen it, so I don't know if that's true. But I think it's very possible that within this gigantic, sprawling epic, there's a lot of very intimate. You don't lose sight of who these people actually were and who they were to each other on a much more granular, intimate scale in the midst of this giant epic. I think that will be the case, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, that sounds... going by what you're saying, it sounds like a pretty good film. It sounds like they've got sort of that balance there, so looking forward to seeing it.
There's something very relaxing about being on a set like that. I remember a friend of mine asked me if I was nervous, and I just felt like, no, I'm actually incredibly calm every day because every single person is a genius. And so you feel like we're going to figure this out here because you have Chris and Hoyta, our DP, and every single person on this crew is the best at what they do. Every single actor is the best at what they do. You could feel the pressure of not wanting to drop the ball, but it was actually, again, incredibly relaxing to know that you're in these hands.
That makes sense. So you've described the film in 3 words. Is there anything else you can tell us about what people can expect?
What I saw shooting that film off and on for 3 months of my life is that you can expect some absolutely gorgeous performances from dozens of phenomenal actors. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of all I can speak to at this moment. I'll be really excited to talk about it once it's out in the world. But you can expect you can expect to watch a bunch of people having the time of their lives at their favorite job they've ever had.
Good. We'll wait and see. Looking forward to it massively. I'm sure it's going to be great. What is Christopher Nolan like as a director? Because I know he's known for going pretty, sort of all out with his movies.
Yeah, I love him so much. He's extraordinary, and you know that you're in the presence of a genius. I mean, I don't think that word is hyperbolic here. But I've worked with some geniuses before who, when they enter a room, want everyone to, tremble in fear in front of them. And Chris is the opposite of that. Chris is friendly as can be, funny as can be, warm as can be, and a real expert at setting up an environment that allows you to feel free and exploratory, and it really feels like you have someone on the other side of the camera who is actively cheerleading for you. It feels like you have someone who hired you because he thinks you're the best person for the part, and he's really excited to see what you're going to do with it. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. You are sometimes on a TV set or on a film set with a director that makes you feel like, oh, please don't ruin my TV show. And that is not a great environment for, one's best acting to occur.
Yeah.
And so Chris, I think he takes a long time deciding who he thinks is right for a part. But when he decides that you're the person, he gives you free rein, and you feel really, really trusted. But you also are aware that you're with someone who knows the film he wants to make. He knows where the parameters are of what's going to work and what's not going to work. But he wants you to explore. He wants you to be surprised. And he takes really, really good care of his cast and crew. And I just think he's extraordinary. And you never know what you're going to get yourself into when you start a job. You don't know if someone's going to be really micromanagey, or if they're going to be stressed out all the time, or if they're going to be, I worked with a director once who didn't say hi to anyone and just sat in the corner all day dressed like the Phantom of the Opera. And you just never know.
Yeah.
And so for Chris, he not only a person who makes unbelievable films, but is capable of giving people an experience that is creative and fulfilling and thrilling on a level that none of us had ever experienced before. He's an incredibly person, and maybe the world's best boss.
Wow. I mean, that's really high praise there.
I stand by every single word of it.
That really sort of shows in his films, in my opinion. You can tell the sort of, how do I put it, the care that goes into them.
I think so, yeah. And they have different layers of texture because of that care that's put in. And little things too, where if it's, it's not a little thing. If it's a close-up of you in an important scene, he always asks, do you want another one? Did you do the thing you wanted to do? He doesn't, oftentimes you do a take and a half of something and the director's like, we got it. And you're like, I don't know if we do actually. But they've already started setting up for the next shot or moving on to the next scene or something. But Chris really values your input and makes you feel like a collaborator.
Yeah, that's important.
And I think you're right. It's not an accident that his films are, it's not an accident that he works that way and that then his films are as beautiful and as thrilling as they are.
You worked with a bunch of actors in Oppenheimer. I mean, the cast list is pretty insane. Were there any in particular that you spent a lot of time with or you sort of grew close with?
I mean, we have a text thread called Oppenhomies that is still going strong to this day. It started as a sort of hotel logistics thread that was just, I'm having dinner here tonight if anyone wants to come with me or something. And so Olivia Thirlby coined the term Oppenhomies. I think I can say because it's in the trailer and because it's in a photo that's released, a lot of my stuff is me and Cillian and Matt Damon and Dane DeHaan. I really love all of those men so much. We had so much fun together and I learned so much from them, and they are all friends of mine forever in a really special way. And then a lot of the other folks on that film. I also spent a lot of time with the sort of scientist ensemble of the film, and that's Jack Quaid, Michael Angarano, Devon Bostick, Olivia Thirlby, Gustav Skarsgård, Chris Denham, a good handful of other people, Benny Safdie, and yeah, I think we're all stuck together for the rest of our lives because we had this unbelievably special experience together, and I think we all left feeling like we got a bunch of new brothers and sisters, and not just in the cast but also in the crew.
That must have been just cool. You're there, you're in a Christopher Nolan film, you're acting opposite Matt Damon and Cillian Murphy. That's just, it must feel kind of like a dream come true in a way.
A dream come true that I didn't know that I could have. I really, I've lived in New York City for 15 years. So much of my experience has been scrappy little independent films that are made in New York City for $4. And those are amazing films a lot of the time. And so the people that I was fantasizing about working with were the people in that genre because they felt within reach. I never, ever would have imagined that, again, just it felt like getting the audition felt like a big deal. And so, yeah, it was, Oppenheimer was so many dreams come true, but on levels that I never
could have imagined.
Yeah. And how beautiful, how thrilling.
It is. I bet.
I would have done that job for 40 years. And my heaven might be doing that job for the rest of my life and it never comes out. We just get to spend all of that time together running around New Mexico.
So it sounds like you had, quite a lot of fun there then. It wasn't just, completely serious sort of vibe.
Well, that's actually what's really funny is that obviously the film is about a world-changing, very harrowing moment in time. We had the most fun with each other. It's funny to watch those trailers, which are understandably incredibly serious, because the sensation of making that film every day felt like we were all just like holding hands and like skipping through the mountains together. We had a real summer camp kind of experience together. But also, those people in the film, the people that we're portraying, are all people that had known each other for a long time. They were in each other's lives their whole lives. And so I think that we weren't building that camaraderie in any sort of conscious way in the hopes that it would transfer to our, when we were running around having fun together, it wasn't because we were doing actor homework together. But I think that that kind of baseline feeling for one another as actors, I think is actually the feeling that those scientists had together at the project.
Right. That's so cool. So, you said you shot for 3 months off and on, and you said you've acted a lot with Matt Damon, Cillian Murphy, and Dane DeHaan. Would you say, how much would you say you're in the film? Can we have sort of like an expectation, if you get what I mean?
Yeah, I'm nervous to say anything. And also I haven't seen the film.
Yeah.
But I'm around. I'm there.
Good.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean,
but it's a nice. What I shot at least was a very nice part.
we'll wait and see, and hopefully we'll see quite a lot of you. And you've worked with some, not just in Oppenheimer, but you've worked with some pretty cool actors all around. I've heard that you worked with Edward Norton. What was he like?
He's great. He directed and starred in a film called Motherless Brooklyn, based on a beautiful novel. And he's great. I only did one day on that. I have one little scene in that film, but I really loved him. I thought we acted together really well. I think we liked each other a lot. We had fun with each other. He's incredibly intelligent. I found him really encouraging. It's also fun. This has happened a couple of times with me. It's really fun to be directed by the person you're in the scene with. You actually have a really intimate experience because Ed, in the teeny scene in that film, he's this close to me. And it's a huge movie set. It's a big Warner Brothers film, but it's fun to be on this gigantic set with hundreds of people working. But the person who's directing you, like, we're shooting a scene, we're acting together, and then he calls cut and then just goes, I think that's so good. Let's just do one more and let's do it like this. What do you think about that? And so it's cool to have an experience on such a huge scale, but the actual acting of it, because oftentimes your director is 7 rooms away yelling at you over a microphone saying, let's go again, but faster or whatever. Or it takes them a minute and a half to like call cut and jog over to the set from whatever holding area they're in. And so it was really fun with Ed because it's a scene that's just the two of us and he's the director and he knows exactly the film he's trying to make. And I hope I get to work with him again. I really, really, really liked him.
Yeah. It's so interesting. You've done such a sort of diverse array of work. You've done theatre, you've done, the small, more sort of indie films, you've done Marvel, and then you've done Christopher Nolan. You've really sort of had a bit of everything.
Yeah, I've been tremendously fortunate. I do try to count my blessings.
Do you have any future ambitions? What's next for you? Any other upcoming films, TV shows?
Right after Oppenheimer, I shot a couple episodes of this Apple TV series called The Big Cigar that I think will be coming out later this year. I don't know exactly when. I really like my role in that because you could almost miss me in the first couple of episodes and then I become incredibly important towards the end of the miniseries. And that was a wild adventure with some amazing actors. It's Alessandro Nivola and Andre Holland and Moses Ingram and PJ Byrne and Noah Emmerich. And unfortunately, my storyline is kind of secluded from most of those people, but I like knowing that I'm on the same show as they are. And that was wild. That was really... My character gets himself into some real trouble, and we shot a lot in Toronto, but we also shot 2 episodes in Cartagena, which was its own adventure. So that'll be out, and yeah, aside from that, I'm on the job market. I'm looking for, we're obviously at the beginning of this writer's strike, but yeah, in terms of ambitions, I would love to find a television series to call my own. And I don't mean that as a series that I'm the star of, but what I'm fantasizing about is, a great television series where I can be the third or fourth most important person on an excellent show that runs for a couple years. That would be for the creative experience of growing with a character over time, but also purely speaking, just to make a little money for a little while. But if I could wave my magic wand, I would be on whatever the next Succession is, or whatever the next The Bear or Veep or any number of other great shows.
Or just filming a Christopher Nolan film forever.
Right, or just continuing, exactly, to just be a contract player for Chris Nolan and make it clear that I will never be leaving.
I mean, that's understandable.
I think all of us would. I think every single one of us would say that.
Yeah.
Big picture, just want to keep working with great people and having great experiences that challenge me and thrill me. But a long-term TV job would be nice right now.
Yeah. So before my final question, one more I just want to add in. You've mentioned a bunch of different places where you've shot films or TV shows or whatnot. Do you have a favorite or anywhere you'd want to go again?
Yeah, I really like all of them for different reasons. I loved shooting in New Mexico. I'd never been there before. Santa Fe is amazing. I really enjoyed shooting in Berkeley. That's a beautiful place in California. And last summer with The Big Cigar, I got to go to Toronto 3 or 4 times, and I loved Toronto. I would really be excited about a long-term job there. But as a working at home, there's something wonderful about being in New York City. And I shot an episode of Manifest like 15 blocks from my apartment one day, and that was great. So I'm pretty easy. There's stuff to like everywhere you go.
Do you have any advice for aspiring actors?
I must, right? Hard because I think the advice would change hourly based on what's going on. I think that it's a marathon, not a sprint. I think is important to keep in mind that, it's a lot of planting seeds, hoping that those seeds bloom into something over time. It's very rare that a great career happens instantly. Sometimes it does, but even if it does, sustaining that over time is a lot of hard work. I think that you have to love acting more than you love success at acting, because chasing success or chasing notoriety or magazine covers or whatever is such a slippery slope. And I think for me, what has sustained me through some real ups and downs has been that I do really love just the simple work of it. So I think that might be my advice today. I think a lot about, there's a great Bryan Cranston video on YouTube where he talks about his advice for auditioning. And he says, you're not there to get a job, you're there to do a job. And I think about that pretty regularly as I'm making tapes or having Zoom auditions or whatever. Yeah, I guess those would be my pieces of advice. And to just keep seeking out the people that you trust and that you see eye to eye with, and try to stay close to the people who you feel like are in your tribe or your group of kindred spirits or something. Because it's a long and hard road, and so you really need people around you that support you and that you support them, and sometimes literally I mean that in terms of people that you can work with, practically speaking, but also just your friends who you can call up and go, this is really hard, can we talk about it? because
Yeah.
there's no stage of the career at which it becomes smooth sailing forever. There are tremendous challenges every step of the way. And so I think having a community is the only way through it. I think people do envision it sometimes as a really sort of cutthroat competitive business. And on the one hand it is, but the people who make up the business 9 times out of 10 are incredibly supportive, incredibly warm people, because we all know what it takes to continue to put ourselves through this thing that is very challenging. I don't know. I think that was kind of rambly.
No. It all makes sense. Yeah. It's interesting to hear what you were saying about, being a community and, not always so competitive, because it's easy to look at it as like a everyone for themselves sort of thing,
Yeah, I mean, I've been auditioning with the same 7 guys for 15 years, and many of them are my great friends, and we're regularly emailing or texting and saying, I just got an audition for this. I don't think I'm right for it. I think you are. Make sure that you audition for this too. And it would be too hard otherwise. And I think that's one of the extraordinary things about Oppenheimer was it was a group of people who we took our work incredibly seriously, but I think we took supporting one another even more seriously and continued to this day.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Olli. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and it's been super, super insightful. Before we go, do you have any social media or anything you want to promote?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm not that interesting on Instagram, but I'm there. It's just my first name, Olli, Olli, my middle initial A, my last name, Haaskivi. But yeah, I mean, I'm there if anyone wants to find me.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to see more of you in Oppenheimer, and also, all of your future projects, including the big cigar. We'll keep an eye out for that. So thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Oh, thank you. I'm so flattered. This was really fun.